Blah! Greetings, boys and ghouls. It is I, Count Zanula, with the fright of your life. Excuse me. Oh, that was weird. I had one of those spit bubbles in my throat. Sorry about that. Happy Halloween, everybody! Yes, you probably did the bulk of your celebrating over the weekend, but let's be honest, today is the real holiday. And with that in mind, it's time to look back at some scary wrestlers. Scary bad, that is. It's Top 8 time. Number 8. Papa Shango. It's hard to be tough on a Hall of Famer like Charles Wright, but there's a reason this gimmick is so well remembered, and it's not because of its depth or nuance. The Voodoo Master Papa Shango debuted in the WWF at the beginning of 1992. A character loosely based on Baron Samedi from the James Bond series, Shango terrorized the company with his chants, spells, curses, and his maniacal laugh.
What is going on?
To his credit, Wright made the character as authentic as possible, having studied a lot of voodoo history in his spare time, but the gimmick absolutely flopped. The character and his special effects were too lame and hokey even by early 90s standards, and fans had no interest in him. But that isn't entirely the fault of the character, as the rug was frequently pulled out from under him. The Big Papa was supposed to feud with Sid Vicious until Sid quit the company. His most famous moments were against the Ultimate Warrior, making him vomit and bleed motor oil. But despite weeks of build, the ankle just stopped for no reason. Once the big storylines fizzled out and the losses piled up, the mystique of Papa Shango wafted away like the smoke that came out of his staff. Or rather, the smoke that wafted from the fatties he was always talking about when he would go on to become the Godfather. Number 7. 7. Well, that's convenient. I've already spoken at length about 7 in my worst debuts countdown, and my opinion on the gimmick has not changed. Don't get me wrong, it was definitely creepy. If I were a little kid watching those vignettes, I would have been absolutely terrified at the idea of seeing that guy peer into my window at night. Though I would have been just as terrified if I was living with that bowl cut. 7 could have been an effective character, but legend has it the reason it was nixed at the last second was because standards and practices, no, I mean the real version, not Lenny and Lodi, thought that a pedophilic Uncle Fester just didn't jive well with the more family-friendly image of WCW, which I guess is a good thing. Now we can all sleep a little easier. Number 6. The ECW... Damn it! There isn't much to say about this character. He only made one infamous appearance on the inaugural episode of WWECW, where he came out to the ring, grunted, then got caned into obligatory by the Sandman. You get the feeling that the zombie was created specifically to show people just how dumb wrestling can be, like it was made with the explicit intent of becoming joke fodder for fans and critics alike. Which, now that I think about it, thanks guys! Number 5. Ta-gar, Lord of the Volcano. Jerry Lawler said on several occasions that in his life he has never drank a drop of alcohol or never taken any kind of recreational drug. But considering the kind of gimmicks he came up with when he was the booker in Memphis, I find that a little hard to believe.
I have roamed the galaxy in search of battle.
You could fill an entire video with the dumb ideas the King came up with, and believe me, one day I certainly will. But the one gimmick that could possibly come closest to actually being scary was Ta-gar, Lord of the Volcano.
Bring me your best, and I shall leave them crippled and destroyed.
Not much is known about Ta-gar besides his love for cheesy special effects, and the man under the hood was apparently a journeyman wrestler named Jim Corbett. Tags only appeared on TV for a few weeks in the early 90s, wrestling Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler a handful of times, but he never did get to follow through on his promise of breaking the bones and spilling the blood of his opponents. After his brief run, Ta-gar presumably returned to his home galaxy, and considering how much of a shameless Dr. Doom clone he looked like, I guess his home planet was LATVIA. Number 4. Mordecai. Kevin Thorne's character in the revamped ECW, revamped, see what I did there? Was not objectively terrible. I think it actually worked well given the climate he was in, and of course having Ariel on your arm is a great way to be remembered, but it was his first run on the main roster that was truly frightening. In April of 2004, we began seeing vignettes for Mordecai, a religious zealot character who condemned the WWE fans for all the sins they've committed. Of course, Mordecai never got into the specifics of what those sins were, but you know what you did, you know! Anyway, this Undertaker clone with the invert filter on debuted May of that year, handily defeating Scotty 2 Hotty at Judgment Day. He beat Bob Holly at the Great American Bash the following month, then lost to Rey Mysterio that same week on SmackDown. And I'm not just glossing over his run, those were literally the only matches he had on TV before they killed the gimmick and sent him back to OVW. All signs were pointing to a feud with Eddie Guerrero, or perhaps Taker himself, but those plans never materialized as people just didn't care about the Pale Rider or his weird crucifix staff.
Hear me! Fear me!
Oh, we heard you, man. That's just why we didn't fear you. Number 3. Relic. That's killer spelled backwards! In 2007, the former Johnny Stamboli debuted for TNA as Redrum, a gimmick based on the imposter Great Muta character he played in Japan. After his debut at Genesis of that year, he was renamed Relic. Besides being billed from the depths of hell and having spooky entrance music, there wasn't much to be feared about him. Well, except for his name, that is. After all, his name is Killer, but in reverse! Relic became an afterthought early on. His partnership with Black Rain was anything but fruitful, and the team lost time and time again. He'd be gone from TNA less than a year after his debut. It turns out just looking scary doesn't matter if you don't win your damn matches. This is a problem that bookers of today are still struggling with. Number 2. The Boogieman. This was a tough entry to include. On the one hand, the Boogieman had some memorable and, dare I say, entertaining moments while working for WWE. But on the other hand...
Some kind of blunt it! He's on the damn ground! He's chewing the damn.
Marty Wright had lied about his age when applying for the $1 Million Tough Enough, but WWE officials liked his look and his determination enough to give him a shot in OVW. Wright debuted with this wild new character in 2005. The angle in OVW was that Wright had gone crazy and actually believed he was the mythical creature, and he had the conviction to make it work. Except... that laughing guy in the crowd was actually a plant, Santino Marella in fact, who completely no-sold the scariness of the Boogeyman. Head booker Jim Cornette was absolutely livid that Marella would neuter the effectiveness of this new character, so JC proceeded to slap the hell out of him backstage after the show, which led to his firing from OVW. But in fairness, if the guy who is paid to act scared by the Boogeyman can't even do that, then maybe he's not that scary? The Boogeyman debuted on the main roster later that year, would stay with the company until 2009, and wrestled about 10 actual matches. But he ate a lot of worms and did scare a lot of wrestlers, in angles that were seen more as goofy than terrifying, which apparently is enough to get signed to a Legends deal in WWE. Now that's scary! Before we find out who made number 1, it's time to address some honorable mentions, specifically blatant horror movie knockoffs. Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Michael Myers. These guys are synonymous with horror. They are characters that, for the most part, have been treated with some level of respect by their franchises. So I find it interesting that some promoters have taken these beloved icons and make them look so... dumb. Over the last several decades, at all levels and all over the world, we've seen slasher flick monsters portrayed in the ring. Guys like Leatherface and Jason are commonplace in Japan, specifically the Wing organization, where you'd see them partake in death matches. Memphis was a breeding ground for these kind of imposters as well, as Jerry Lawler is a known comic book and movie fanatic. I think what makes this kind of thing so hard to swallow in wrestling is we know these characters exist in the fantasy world of cinema, and even though film and wrestling have their fair share of wild characters, I think that they only really belong in their own respective universes. When you see a crossover like that, it just comes off to me as very hokey, and if you think I'm full of it, just think about Zeus and RoboCop and MacGruber and the Three Stooges. Just how many of those in-ring cameos are remembered fondly? Even Stephen Amell had the decency to play himself at SummerSlam. And the number 1 worst scary wrestler of all time is... surprise, it's multiple! The Dungeon of Doom. Truly, any individual member of this WCW stable would be right at home in this countdown, but I'm lumping the whole damn group into this entry, particularly from 1995 to 96. The DoD was formed with the specific intent of getting Hulk Hogan over in WCW, which was no easy task. Since he was made famous fighting over-the-top characters in the WWF, then doing the same thing in WCW would surely create the same results. But Booker and Dungeon leader Kevin Sullivan upped the ante by making these characters so over-the-top and ridiculous, the fans would have no choice but to hate them and cheer Hogan. Well, the first half of that came true. Kamala, the Shark, Meng, the Giant, Loch Ness, the Zodiac, King Curtis Iakea covered in popcorn finish, the goddamn Yeti. These exaggerated B-movie monsters were all brought in with the goal of getting WCW fans to like Hulk Hogan, but all it did was accelerate the decline of his popularity. Fans saw right through the bullshit in Uncensored 1996, when Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage defeated Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and 7 other Dungeon members in a triple-decker cage match. These goofs could not be taken seriously as villains, and therefore, neither could Hogan as the conquering hero. Got any more spooky inclusions for this list? Let me know in the comments section below. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time. You see nothing.